only mode.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Tim Tormone, and I'm the Associate Executive Director of Alumni Engagement and Outreach at the University of Maryland Alumni Association. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to the webinar, Making the Most of Your High School Years by Dr. Bill Higgins, Associate Professor Emeritus at the University of Maryland. Dr. Higgins received his BS degree in biology and his PhD from Florida State. And he is a well-known and well-loved professor on campus for over 42 years. He's numerous advisor, mentor, and faculty awards, too many to mention, but I wanted to let you know that he has a lot of experience working with students and helping students succeed. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Dr. Higgins, and thank you again for joining.
Well, good afternoon. Glad you're able to join the Terrapin Alumni Network and talk with us this afternoon. This is very different for me because most of my teaching and my seminars are always very interactive. So I figure if I'm talking more than half of the time during a presentation, something's wrong. I usually like to get the audience. So we are going to be asking you some questions, and you won't be able to obviously answer us, but you'll have to at least think about them and keep up with those kinds of things as we go along. What I want to do in the next hour is present to you specific strategies. I'm a strategy guy. I'm a kind of guy that believes in their specific habits, specific things that people do that make them successful in whatever endeavor. So if you were going to learn how to play golf, you go to a pro, and the pro shows you certain things to do. If you're going to be a baseball pitcher, you're going to hit, you have people that show you specific things to do that make you better at it. What I want to do is talk about what I've seen over the past 42 years that successful students accomplish as they go through college. And of course, this starts in high school. So when people come to us from high school, many of them are not really prepared because they don't have the specific strategies, the game plan to be successful. And you need to start developing that while you're in high school. So that's what I want to talk about, okay? First thing I want you to think about is where you're going. So you're in high school, you're going to finish high school. Some of you, probably most of you, are thinking about going to college. Well, when you're finished with college, where do you think that's going to lead you? Not maybe a specific job title or whatever, but you might be thinking about something. If you're not going to high school or not going to college and you finish high school, you know, you're going to enter the job market. So I want you to think about what kinds of things you're thinking about. Now, saying that, I want you to, if possible, write down what's the biggest worry in your future. What is it out there that really makes me nervous about where I'm going and what I want to do? So take a minute to think about it. This is something really, really important because you have to address this at every step of the way. So please take a minute and just think about that. And write it down if you've got something there. Because we're going to give you some other things to think about. I don't know if they told you this before, but I'm actually going to give you homework later. Some of it relates to this, okay? All right. So one of the things that I'm always intrigued by is this question that's now on your screen. What's your reason for going to college? Why do you want to go to college? So I gave this workshop live last night, and I got some answers which I usually get when we do this. And a number of people told me they want to go to college so they get a good job. I don't want a job. You don't really want a job, do you? Think about the implications of the word job. You don't want a job. You want a life. You want to be doing something where, yeah, they may pay you for it, you may work hard, but it's not a job. So you're not going to college to get a job. People told me they wanted to get educated. What does that mean? People told me probably last night, the one thing that struck me was people said they're going to college to learn how to be successful. And I think that's pretty close. But let me tell you why you're going to college. You're going to go to college to have a good time. That's why you go to college, and don't let anybody tell you any different. Now, before your parents and everybody with you are freaking out, let me explain that. If you're the kind of person that belongs in college, when you're having a good time, it means you're having a good time because you're doing well. You're having fun. If you're not doing well, it's not the partiers. It's not the people who sleep all day and party. Those people are not having a good time. They're having episodes of good times, but they're really very unhappy in the long run. What I'm looking for are people who go to college, who have lives, who do what they like, and are successful. And they're successful in all aspects of their life. They play as hard as they work. They sleep, they do all the things that you want in a balanced life. So you're going to college to have a good time, and you're going to have a good time when you have a balanced life and you're doing well. So that's one of the first things. Next thing I want you to think about is after college, one of the following possibilities are probably on your agenda. Some people may want to go to grad school. Maybe you want a master's of public health or a education master's or PhD or something. Some of you are thinking of law school, medical school, dental school, veterinary college, PA, nursing school. Some of you are thinking about entering the job market. Some of you may feel you need another year or two of experience before you enter grad school or med school or the job market. So you might be thinking about an internship. In any of these options, you have to understand that you're going to fill out an application. So unless you're going to go back home and play video games on the couch, you're going to finish college and you're going to have an application. The last thing, move back home. Let me tell you something. Your parents, I'm sure, love you, but let me tell you, when you graduate from college, they really don't want you to go back home. You really need to be thinking about your next move with their support probably, but you need to be thinking about moving out, moving on, and so you're going to face an application. And I want you to think about right now, I get out of college, I'm ready to graduate from college, no matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill out an application. If you don't go to college and you come out of high school, that application is going to be up front even earlier. So high school is even more important if you're not going to go to college and you're going to fill out an application. So I want you to think about right now, you apply, I don't care whether you apply for a job at accounting, a position in a graduate school, you apply to medical school, whatever you're going to do, what is it that I, as an employer or admissions officer, what am I looking at in your application? What are some of the things I want to see that you have and you bring to this job or this position that I'm looking to fill? Well, when you think about it, I think these are the things that we normally reflect upon. Never underestimate the power of your grades. You don't have to be perfect, but good grades and consistent performance tells me a lot about you. It tells me you're smart. It tells me you work hard. It tells me you know how to learn. It tells me you're organized. It tells me a lot of things. So even if you're applying for an entry-level position in marketing, or you're applying for a teaching position or anything else, if you can put down and present me with a transcript that has really solid grades, you're really on top of that pile, because that's one of the first things we look at. If you do get good grades, if your position, for example, medical school or graduate school requires a test, an LSAT for law school, your GPA is going to be reflected in your test scores. It's very hard to do the second bullet without getting the first. I never, ever, for a graduate program or anything, would ever consider anybody with poor communication skills. You're going to write a cover letter. You're going to write personal statements. You're going to write a lot to even get to the job, and then we're going to interview you. So you really, really have to have excellent communication skills. And many of us have difficulties with this, either because we don't practice, we're shy, whatever. So we're going to talk about this. The other thing I look for is I see students coming out of high school applying to college, and I look at this incredible list of activities. They've done everything. But what I'm really looking for is, in those activities, do I see leadership? Do I see accomplishment? I'm not looking for a lengthy list of meetings you went to. I don't care about that. I don't care how many societies you're a member of. I want to know you organized and raised money for Dancers Against Cancer. I want to know you organized the food can drive. I want to know that you were the president of the Pre-Med Society. I want to know you were the president of the Future Lawyers Society. I want to see leadership, and I want to see things. I want you to leave your mark. And then, of course, when you start figuring out what you really want to do when you get, when you're in college, I want to see that a lot of this experience is relevant to what you want to do. You've got to do it before you get into it. So if you're going to go to med school, you're going to have to spend time in a hospital volunteering. If you're going to go into business, you better have an internship or two. So these are things that are going to be on your application. I'm looking for people with a life. I'm looking for people who have a lot of different interests outside of the workplace, because people without a life don't do well in the long run. They burn out quickly, and we're going to talk more about this. If you have the first couple of things, leadership, communication skills, and that, getting references are not really any problem. And if you're the kind of person who can do the first couple of things and develop that, your personality is going to go along, and we're going to get along really well at an interview. So I want you to, when you get this list later, put this list somewhere, print it out, put it on your wall, and think about, these are the things that I need to develop while I'm in college. Don't let the situation confuse you. I mean, this is really very, very clear. There is no way around this application game. You are going to fill out an application. It's going to happen, so you might as well think about what's on there and think about how we can develop ours to be the best. When we do that, I just want to point out that we need to do a few things in high school so that we are ready to move on to college and work on that list. The day you enter college, nothing you do in high school matters anymore. You will never put any of your high school accomplishments on any resume or any job app. Nobody cares. But the things you develop in high school that you take to college really are critical, and that's where we want to focus on right now.
Dr. Higgins,
Yes.
I have 2 questions from our audience. Can I read them to
All right.
you?
Please do.
Joe asks, what do I do if I have no clue about my future? And then the second question comes from Alyssa, and she asks, what do I major in when I go to college if I am completely undecided?
Okay, so both of those questions are related, and I think they're very, very common. First of all, I don't think anybody at any point in their life is absolutely certain about it. What they do get some certainty is what they want to do tomorrow. So if you're absolutely undecided about anything, then you work and you develop certain basic skills and talents, and you provide evidence of leadership so people know that no matter what you attempt in the future, you're going to be successful at it. And when you go to college, your major is really, quite frankly, irrelevant. If you're going into engineering or architecture, that's a certified program, so that's a really lockstep. But if you're going to go, for example, I'm very familiar with people applying to medical school. People apply to medical school with every major under the sun, from biomed engineering to music performance to whatever. So it really doesn't matter as long as along the way you pick up the prerequisite courses and get the right internship. So it doesn't make any difference what you major in. What you find out is what you like, what you're excited about, what you're passionate about. You major in that, and you figure it out as you go along. You can't pre-plan something when you haven't been through the system. So when students come to me and they're applying to the University of Maryland at 17 and they say, I want to go to med school, I say, how do you know that? You haven't been there. So don't worry about it. But the point is, if you do well, like we say here on the screen, if you do well, everything will fall into place. Are we good with that then? Okay. So if you do well, don't worry. Okay. If you decide to change your mind about from one major to another in middle college, doesn't matter. As long as you leave behind a history of doing well and people behind you that you've left say good things about you, the door is always open. And the next thing may be the most important thing. When I see freshmen come into Maryland who are doing poorly, and it's not many, but there's a number of them, usually it's not because they're fooling around and just not paying attention. Usually they over stress and over everything. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to do well. Nobody expects everybody to be a 4.0. Let me give you an example. I asked last night, what do you think the toughest thing to do coming out of college is? And some people said getting into law school, getting into med school. Okay, so let's take med school, for example. I asked the audience last night, what percentage of people that apply to med school coming out of college get into med school? And people were guessing 5%, 10%. And the answer is no, it's 43%. 43% of the college graduates or soon-to-be graduates that apply to medical school get in. People have all this myth about this, the difficulty and everything else, and sure, it's hard. But if you've got the numbers, you're going to get in. To go to med school, you have to get half A's and half B in college. Can you do that? If you get half A's and half B's in college, you'll get into law school in a heartbeat. So understand you don't have to be perfect. You have to just do well enough. And you're not going to do well enough if you're not happy and you're not doing things you like. So let's talk about how you achieve the goals of getting those things on your resume. And you do it with the following bullets. Whatever we do, whatever we attempt, we're going to do well. And I want to talk about some aspects of how you do well. Whatever you do good. You do good for others. You need to involve yourself in some kind of service activity along the way. Employers, graduate programs, professional schools almost insist upon this. They're looking for people who are good people, who do good things. I'm going to give you my rules of life, and we're going to talk about a couple essential skills. Now, let me tell you about my rules for life. When I went to college, I had a good time my first year. I had a really good time. I had a really good time to the point of a 1.7 grade point average. I was a disaster. And so I realized I had to wake up. And being the kind of guy as a strategy guy, I had to figure out how to do certain things to get better. And it's those things which I've kind of codified into my rules of life. So that's me. I don't have my glasses on this morning, but that's a picture of me. And those of you who know me know the resemblance right there. So I want you to pay attention to these. And rule number one is really simple. Life and education aren't spectator sports. Show up. Now, there's two parts to that, two different meanings to that. If I'm teaching freshman biology in the fall, I will have 165 students in the class. Where do you think my A students sit? Yeah, they're up front. And I know the first three rows and talk to them by name. They're also there all of the time. If I start the class Labor Day week in September, by the third week in October, any given Friday lecture, I will not have more than 65% of the students in lecture. I don't know where they are, but they ain't there. So the two parts of that are that you have to show up consistently, whether it's a lecture or something you're involved in, and you have to show up and participate. You can't go to a class and sit there and drool. So when you go to your high school classes, if you've got an option, get used to the fact, sit up front, participate, because that's how you learn. You can cut your learning time and increase your retention and increase a lot of other skills simply by sitting up front, paying attention, and participating. You also then, by doing that and answering questions and communicating with me as a professor or the teacher, you develop your confidence. You should never be afraid to ask a question. Converse of that is, when you get involved in activities, you also show up, work hard, and do the right things. But many students, when they get to college, aren't selective enough. You really got to think about, is this what I'm passionate about, or am I doing this because I think that's what people want me to do this other thing in the future? Find things you're passionate about, be selective, make major commitments of your time and effort to those endeavors, but don't join everything and don't try to do everything. And don't worry about what people say or what you think people want you to do because you want to do X, Y, or Z in the future. Just do the things you're passionate about, take the leadership role, leave your mark, make a contribution, and that's what people are going to look for, and that's what people are going to remark upon in the future. Here's a typical student in the back row of lecture on a Friday morning if they happen to show up. I have no idea what these people are doing. The point of this slide is probably the worst thing you can do is be apathetic about anything you're involved in. Apathy is a disaster. Apathy shows up, apathy appears, and people will resent you very quickly for being there and being apathetic. You're more of a problem than you are part of the solution. Okay. Rule number 2, and this is really important in high school, hang out with winners. Well, here's the definition by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. One that's successful, especially through praiseworthy ability and hard work. Ability and hard work. My definition is somebody who gets it. So I want you to think about somebody at your school, an upperclassman maybe, somebody you admire, somebody who is, in your definition, a winner. Got that person in mind? Think about one or two of the really tremendous winners on the teaching staff, one of the faculty. Can you see them? Do you see them? Think about a relative, maybe an aunt or an uncle or somebody who, oh my, what a winner. I mean, I know your parents are all winners, but let's exclude them for a moment. So when you think about peers, when you think about teachers, when you think about family members or acquaintances who are winners, I want you to ask yourself, what makes them a winner? Why are they winners? What do they do? When you go to a lecture, when you go to a class, this person captures my attention. They're really good. Why? What is it they do? So what I want you to do is I want you to start a little notebook. And I want you to start noting people that you find and run across who are winners, people you admire. And I want you to write down specifically what it is they do, what habit they have, what characteristic they have, what skill they've developed. What is it that makes them a winner? What is it that makes you want to be like them in that way? So what I'm telling you to do is steal from these people. I'm telling you to figure out the good things they do and borrow those things and incorporate those, learn how to do those things so you too, people will admire and become a winner. I always hang out with winner. Here's biggest winner of all. Me and Testudo go way back. We go back 42 years. I want you to be one of these people. I want you to hang out with these folks right here. Conversely, you know people who aren't winners. People who, well, kind of waste your time, make you mediocre. They're happy to talk to you about their problems all day, but they never quite care about your side of the conversation. So in other words, when you got people like this guy, dump them. Don't waste any personal time or effort. You don't have it. You got a lot to do and a lot of things. So you find winners, you copy their habits, you figure out why they're good, and the corollary of that is you spend less time and you dump the losers. And while you're at it, you might figure out what is it that makes this person somebody or do things I don't want to do or be. Point out see if you can identify what makes them losers in your mind. And again, I'm not talking about on the social scale. I'm talking about people who are bright, who are good, who get things done. So let's take that out of the equation. So I said you're going to have homework. Here's your first homework assignment. You're going to get that notebook, and you're going to find one winner in each of those categories. I want you to find a peer, somebody, a student that you know. I want you to find a teacher, and I want you to find somebody that you know, an acquaintance, a family member, somebody, and I want you to list the 2 or 3 things about them that make them winners. And I want you to commit to down the road thinking more about that so that you also can do that. Rule number 3, I want you to stop studying, and I want you to start learning. When I was at the university, I worked in the president's office for a while, and my job there was to figure out why so many freshmen do so poorly. And so we began it's now called the UNIV program. It's a freshman orientation course. It's a 8-week course that we encourage all freshmen to take, small group of students, one trained faculty member, staff member who leads it, and we talk about learning strategies and how to use the university. Wherever you go to college, they should have that course, and I strongly encourage you to take it. I think it's one of the most useful things you can do. What I noticed in developing that course and when I interviewed a lot of freshmen is they don't know how to learn. They bring to us all of the various, quote, strategies that they got by with in high school. When you get to college, it doesn't work anymore for many people. So I want to ask you something. See, in college, we really require an in-depth understanding of things. So how do you learn? How do you know with absolute certainty you know something? How do you own that material? Not just today or tomorrow, but on the final and next week and next year. I've strived for this my whole life because I have for 42 years taught pre-medical physiology. I have 2,500 former students who are doctors and dentists. I want to make sure when they're treating you, they remember what I taught them way back in their past. So how is it you know something? When do you own that material? And the answer is, if you can't teach it, you don't know it. So what I'm telling you is, when you study, when you start studying, think about, what does study mean? I don't want you to study. I want you to learn. And so what you do is you teach it. You draw the picture. You tell the story. So find somebody who may be struggling. Explain it to them. If you can explain it to them, you understand it. And when you get hung up on something you can't explain, then you've identified what you don't know. So let me just tell you a couple things. Number one, I was very popular in college because I wasn't that smart. So the smart people wanted to study with me because they figured if I could teach Higgins, man, I know this stuff. And the second part of this business about teaching it, is that it's really, really, really important to figure out what you don't know. And teaching it, you learn that. Let me tell you what's going to happen in college. So you're gonna get to college. Now let's say you're in your freshman course, and I don't care whether it's psychology or sociology or biology, whatever. And you're going to get to something to go, the professor's never going to ask me that. He's never going to ask me that. She's not going to cover that in the test. Well, guess what? I'm omniscient. I'm a professor. I know what you don't know. And that's why that's always question number one on the test. So don't think that way, because I know what you don't know and it'll be there. So when you go to college, you got to tutor. You got to teach other people. You got to study with a blackboard. Write it out. Draw the picture. If we're doing math together, 3 of us get together, we do our math homework. I'll do one problem on the board. I get stuck, we explain it. We teach each other. We get much better at it. And the reason this works is because we're using different modalities. We're reading it, we're seeing it with our eyes, we're talking about it, we're drawing it, we're rewriting it. All of these things are what implants those memories in your brain and make connections. And tell it as a story. If you try to memorize a list of details, you won't know it very long. On the other hand, if you can tell me the story of protein synthesis, you can tell me the story of this social group, you can tell me the story of this chemistry reaction as one example of many, then in the framework of that story, you will remember the details. So here are things I see students doing. Now, if you've got highlighters and you highlight your books and your notes, go get them as soon as we're done and throw them away. It's the most useless habit that people are in when they come to college. What do you think? Highlighting something scans that into your brain? It's pointless. It doesn't mean anything. Oh, I'll go back and read it. Well, reading it 20 times, it's not going to exam doesn't work either. Let me tell you what happens in college. Most of the students who come to Maryland have rarely, if ever, had a C. About 75% of the freshmen, when they take their first round of midterms, will get their first C or work doing steps 1, 2, and 3 instead of what I say. Now, if I give you one tip when you get to college, and even in high school, I think this probably will be good for you. If you're taking my class, the first thing you do is you find people who've taken my class and you get my old exams and quizzes. And when you've finished your studying, you see if you can answer the relevant questions on to that material. If you can explain the answers, not only come up with the answers, but explain why that's the answers, you own that material and you'll be an A student and you don't need to worry about it. Okay? Yeah, all-nighters don't work. You're not night people. You've got to show up. You got to show up for my class wide awake, alert, with your A game. So, Mr. Tim, do we have any questions coming in at this point?
Yes, we do, Dr. Higgins. I have a question from Saeed. Can you give me one specific thing you did to learn to get good grades?
Yeah. I tell you what I did. I started tutoring. I started teaching. When I went to college, we didn't have a diagnosis of ADHD, but I know I suffered from it because, in lecture it just was like I couldn't focus. It didn't really matter. So I worked for somebody who was in a lab who was very smart, and he realized that I wasn't really dumb. I just wasn't getting out of what I needed to get out. So what he did was he bought me the textbook, say, for genetics. And he said, you're running the review session on Thursdays. And so for the course I was supposed to be taking but wasn't, I was running a review session. So I had to figure out how to learn it and explain it. And then when I couldn't explain something, I would go to the professor with that list of questions, and she would re-explain it, and then I would re-explain it. And so I think that is the most powerful thing I know how to do. So when people come to me, I spend 2 days a week at the National Institute of Health, and I advise people who have graduated from college all over the country about getting into graduate school and med school. And when they say they're studying for the GRE or the MCAT or the dental exam or whatever, I say, great, the best thing you can do is go tutor freshman biology or whatever. So I think teaching is the most powerful thing. And again, the other thing is, if you've got old exams, old quizzes from previous semesters from students who've taken the course, if you can answer those questions and explain it, then you go in with that confidence. Exam day isn't a stress. Exam day is your opportunity to show off, and that's what you want it to be.
Dr. Higgins, I actually have another question that just came in. It is from Kathy, and she writes, I am a visual person. Reading something doesn't sink in at all. Any suggestions?
Yeah, you and me both. I am totally visual, which is why the internet and PowerPoint made my teaching much better, because I'm so dyslexic I can't really write on the blackboard, and I'm a terrible illustrator. So I'm totally with you. So what I did was I took my class notes, but I would read my class notes out loud and rewrite them a little bit. So that using the vocal, right? And then when I had to incorporate that into teaching and drawing the picture and telling a story, that made all the difference for me. I'm totally with you on that. I could read something 25 times and I might know it for 10 minutes. But by vocalizing it and listening to myself as I'm doing it, it seemed to put it in context. The other thing is, again, put it together as a story. It's not a list of facts, and unfortunately too many of my colleagues teach as a list of facts to memorize. Well, if you're thinking of something, and I usually, let's say DNA synthesis, there's a story, and I like to go, when I teach DNA synthesis in class, I get all the visual learners together, and we go to YouTube, and we go to the Khan Academy, and we look at all these wonderful videos that I turn the sound off and make them explain it as it's happening. So I think YouTube videos and other things, and if you search the internet, there are many courses, college courses or high school courses around that have wonderful videos. So I think those are really, really powerful ways that we can learn. Okay, we good with that, Tim? Okay. So now that we've talked about that, I want you to think about some of the students. You know, you've all got students at your high school that you know are really brilliant and do well. You know, people that just blow the curve every time. Find out what they do, how they do it. I'll bet they do some of the things we just talked about, right? Okay. The other thing that I am troubled by when we're talking about learning is that people get way too focused. You know, they go to college and they're majoring in subject X and they want to know, you know, what kind of things related to subject X can I take? And that's wrong. So when you're in high school, start branching out. Take some other stuff. Take some weird stuff. Take some stuff you've never looked at. Take some art history if you get a chance. Branch out. Go into other things. Learn in different areas and different modalities. And by doing that, you'll enhance your learning ability in your major area of interest. But you know, people who study only one thing really, really, really are boring. So you'll find there's a whole world. Okay. You don't get any better if you don't challenge yourself. So you know that if you're playing football or you're in the theater or you're playing music, you got to practice. And you don't practice over and over the stuff that you're already good at. You practice new stuff. And so what I want to get you to do is take yourself out of your comfort zone. So right now, I want you to think about one thing that I really am uncomfortable with. One thing that I'm really not, whoa, wow. So let me think about that. How many of you are afraid of public speaking? How many of you are afraid of spiders? Afraid of heights? Afraid of water? Afraid of meeting new people? Whatever. Whatever really freaks you out and makes you uncomfortable, I want you to identify that, okay? And then I want you to understand you only get better by stepping out of that comfort zone. So when I talk to people who are interviewing for college or interviewing for med school or a job or something, oh, I'm really paranoid, I'm really freaked out by this interview. Well, the people who say that are people that have never challenged themselves. You're not going to get better at anything if you don't put it on the line and step outside yourself. My observation about life, there's only two kinds of people in the world. Those of you that played sports, those of you that played music, those of you that were in the theater, you understand that when the curtain goes up or it's time to take the penalty kicks in a soccer game and the adrenaline kicks in, that's when you find out those two kind of people. The first kind of person, the kind of person we're looking for is somebody who lives for that moment. That moment is what I strive to do. I want that challenge. The adrenaline makes me better. And you know what? If I mess up and I don't do well, it's all right. I still want to do it the next time. I want even more to come back and do it. And the other kind of person just doesn't want to be there, doesn't want that challenge, fades into the background. Well, the people who live for that moment aren't born that way. They get better that way by stepping outside their comfort zone and doing more and more and challenging themselves all the time. Let me give you two quick stories. Had a young man, see, if you came to my class freshman year, my freshman orientation class, and I found out you were afraid of heights, you and I would walk over to the climbing wall and we would climb that wall together. It might not get done the first day, but I would not let you go until we got to the top of that wall and you had at least addressed that issue. Had a young man who couldn't swim. He's from Florida. He couldn't swim. What the heck was that about, right? So I took him over to the water polo practice. They threw him in the water. He almost drowned. 4 years later, he gets an invitation to the tryouts for the U.S. Olympic water polo team in San Diego. Who knew? I have another young man who was a very bright guy and a lot of fun, but had this absurd fear of public speaking. So, of course, I took him to Toastmasters and made him a TA and everything else. He's now a legislator from the state of Florida and speaks routinely all the time. So those are the kinds of things you need to do. And I think this person said it very well. You just have to put yourself in situations where you're outside of your comfort zone. Otherwise, you're never going to get any better. And every challenge is going to be more than a challenge. You're going to be fearful of it, and you have to embrace it. So, homework assignment number 2. Within the next 30 days, you're going to find and do something that makes you uncomfortable. Now, I'm not going, don't pick up a poisonous snake or something like that, don't skydive necessarily, whatever. But there are things that make you uncomfortable. Address it, and every month do something, address some issue that you're afraid of, and do it. Very hard to do. So if there are parents listening, help me out with this. Bug your kids. Annoy them until they do it. Annoy them to the point where this is much more comfortable than not doing it. Okay? I always wanted to play music. I have no musical ability. I'm the only Irish guy I know who can't sing, dance, or carry a tune. And I've always wanted to get that baton and address the orchestra. So one of my last years at the university, in my purple Santa hat at graduation in December, Dr. Sparks got me and handed me the baton because he knew my dream. And I got to direct the symphony orchestra. Talk about outside my comfort zone. I've probably never been that scared in my life. 5,000, 6,000 people or more, and I'm directing the orchestra. Wow, awesome. Rule number 5. You're not going to want to hear this, but I have to tell you anyway. You don't know how to write. You can't write. You think you can write, some of you, but you can't. You really don't know how to write. Somewhere these people come to college and they know every adjective in the book and everything else. I have read 200 plus personal statements on medical and dental school applications from college graduates this year. Out of the 200 and plus applications, essays that I have read, I've yet to find one that was correctly punctuated. I have yet to find one that had perfect sentence structure that didn't contain some awkward sentence structure, inappropriate verbs, verb-subject mismatch, whatever. You can't write. You don't know how to write well. Speaking is another matter we'll get to. I cannot impress upon you the importance of learning to write and speak well. Whatever you do, we're going to read a cover letter or a personal statement or something. As a mentor of graduate students, the last thing I would ever do is take a graduate student who couldn't write. I might as well shoot myself in the head because I'm going to end up writing everything for them. When I hire somebody, they've got to be able to write. And if they write well, they've got to have a personality and be able to interview. They have to be able to communicate verbally. When you go to an interview, the significant part of the interview lasts 45 seconds. It's that first 45 seconds where you look me in the eye, you shake my hand, you smile, and I get a sense you've got a personality and confidence. And that's what speaking well is about. It's about personality, confidence, eye contact, and conversation. And so you need to do that. So how do you do that? Well, here's a colleague from the University of Maryland, a good friend of mine, Reed Compton, his comment, which I have always appreciated. So wherever you go, whatever you do, how well you speak and how well you write will largely determine your opportunities. So buy this book. I got my first copy as an undergrad. I got a copy as a grad student. E.B. White is the person who wrote Charlotte's Web. Will Strunk was White's advisor when White was a student at Cornell years ago. This book is now in its umpteenth hundredth printing. I actually was given by the publisher a leather-bound 50th anniversary edition. Buy it. It's a very small book, maybe 120 pages. is the most useful thing to read a couple of times every time before you start to write something. Put this into practice. It's full of good examples, and you go, ooh. The second thing you got to do about writing is you've got to find an editor. I need you to take the English class from that person who is a real bear. I need you to take the high school English class from the person who is most critical, is just the person you fear the most, the meanest person. Because when you learn to satisfy them, when you learn by getting your papers back with more red ink on it than you originally put on it, then you're doing something. Public speaking, you got to practice. You got to stand up in front of the mirror, deliver the speech. It builds confidence. It spills over into many other things. If you're a good public speaker, you don't have to worry about first impressions, right? And so what I want you to do when you go to a class or you go to a lecture or you go to a seminar, why is that person so good at it? What are the things they do? Write them down in that book we talked about before and copy their techniques, copy their strategies. At some point, when you get into speaking and that, film yourself, watch yourself. Ooh, that's painful, but it'll be very good and help you, right? So do that. Homework number 3. Find someplace, do it. It'll be painful. You might not be good at it at first, but it's something you have to be good at down the road. There's no way around it. So, best way to do it, put yourself out there, practice. The other thing, we talked about role models and copying things good, successful people do. Next time you go to and you hear somebody speak who's terrible, why were they terrible? Make a list of that and avoid those things too. Okay. Rule number 6 goes along with stepping out of your comfort zone, and rule number 5, which is about learning to speak. Meet people. Every day, every week, go out of your comfort zone and meet new people. So I want you in the next 2 weeks to meet somebody totally out of your normal routine and environment. You get on the 7-Eleven, there's that homeless person hanging out, introduce yourself. Find out what their story is. Go into a shelter or a soup kitchen. How about meeting that somebody you've always looked at and go, wow, I really like them. Meet them. Introduce yourself to a teacher outside of class. Again, do this routinely. Make it a habit. Make it a point in your life to do this. Again, it will be what's the worst that could happen? Somebody brushes you off. So what? Doesn't matter. But if you don't practice and learn how to do these things, you're not going to. I think somebody paid me a compliment. I spoke somewhere recently, and somebody paid me, I think was one of the highlight compliments of my life. She said, Dr. Bill Higgins has never met a stranger. And I think that a lot of my success is my ability to walk into a room and meet anybody and talk with anybody. And you need to develop that skill. All right. The next rule. When in doubt, apply the Ask Mom rule. So I want you to think, in high school and in college, anytime you're thinking about doing something, ask the following question. Is this something I would tell Mom about? If the answer to that question is no, then you probably ought to rethink it. So you'll save yourself a lot of trouble if you apply the Ask Mom rule. Okay. Rule number 7. I gave a workshop to high school students a couple of weeks ago at the NIH, and the first question from the audience was from a 16-year-old, to be 17-year-old student who's going to be a senior in high school. And her first question was, how am I going to pay for med school? She's 17 years old. She's never done anything but a little candy striping in a hospital. She has no idea that she wants to be a doctor is cut out for it. But she has her life scripted. When I talked to her, she knew what college she was going to. She had mapped out her major. She had mapped out her activities. She had everything scripted. It was ridiculous. She was not going to have any life. Everything was going to be. And I said to her, what if you get into your junior year and realize you don't like medicine? Well, I'm going to go to med school anyway. I don't know if it was her parent. I don't know, but it was horrible. Don't script your life. Excuse me on that. That's don't script your life. Be prepared, right, for anything that comes up and surprises you. Look for different courses. Look for different things. You just never know what the outcome is going to be. Okay?
Dr. Higgins, I have a couple of
Yes.
questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
This question is from Tom, and he writes, how do I develop that I can talk to anyone skill that you just mentioned?
Yeah. The first thing you do is you look at yourself in the mirror and you watch yourself do the most important thing that you need to do in life, which is smile. And if you walk up to somebody with a smile and you put out your hand and you look them in the eye, then they're not going to shy away. They're not going to get the wrong impression. But you got to look at yourself do it. Okay, so you do that. And you just get in the habit of doing it. I mean, what is it that makes us afraid to walk up to another human being and ask them a question? The other trick to that, I think, is you ask them a question about something you know they're not afraid or they're willing to talk about. So, for example, so you're a Yankees fan there. Gee, that's too bad. I'm really sorry about that. Or, you walk up to somebody and you go, wow, that's a great coach purse. Whatever. Just make them comfortable talking about something about them, and the story will come out. I can't begin to tell you the number of interesting people and contacts I've made around the world, just sitting down in an airport lounge and making idle conversation with people. And it's a skill you've got to have in many of your professions, in many of your future jobs. It's really important that you do that.
Okay.
You got anything else, Tim?
Yeah, the second question is from, and I'm sorry if I pronounce this wrong, Monahana. I am way too shy to get up and meet someone or to speak in public. I know I'll just fumble and mess it up. How can you help me?
You know what? You're probably going to get up and fumble and mess it up. You're right. You absolutely probably will. I was horrible. I was tripping all over myself the first several times I did it. Does that mean that you never do it? Does that mean you spend your life in a corner? No. You just got to do it. You got to get up and practice. So I think the key to that, though, is find a less fearful audience to start with. So I think speaking in front of a group of peers sometimes is probably not the best environment. But you've got to figure out something. So unfortunately, I don't know that there is a Toastmasters organization for high school age students. I know Toastmasters is very active with college, so when you get to college, join Toastmasters. It's a very friendly environment that people help you. Take speech classes. Do whatever you need to do. And the other thing is, why am I shy? What is it specifically that I'm worried about? Am I worried people are not going to like me? Or am I worried people are going to think I'm dumb? I don't know what the issue is for me. It was just I would worry that I wouldn't know what was coming next. And you just have to do the normal pauses and think. And people are going to go with you as long as you're smiling and you're open. And I guess the other thing about this is you have to understand that this is a a thing that you are going to have to do your entire life. You are never going to be successful and be happy and be fulfilled and make a contribution if you are somebody who has the back desk and the back cubicle and we can't put out there to meet people. So it's just something you really, really, really have to do. If it becomes pathological, schools have counselors, people have counselors, and I myself have taken many professionals to counselors, and we talk about what it is that makes you fearful of this, and let's find an environment where you can at least start. So I think I think if you start by asking yourself what makes me afraid, what is the issue, and you just get doing it. You just got to do it, and you may have to do it more than anybody else, but don't give up. You got to do it. Okay. All right. The next rule is really very serious. I just talked to so many people, who just are not happy with day-to-day life. If you get up in the morning and boy, today's a drag, well, you got to live with it every now and then. But if you get up and five out of 7 days are miserable, you got to fix something. It just isn't working, right? So when you're in college, and you, boy, I hate chemistry, or I hate this, or I hate that. Well, why are you doing it? When you're in high school, find things you like, find things you're passionate about. Well, if I go into art, I'm never going to get a job. Well, maybe you don't get a job in art, but at least you do it on the side, so it's there in your life and it's fun. Those of you that play music and do artwork, when you go to college, take your instrument, take your art stuff. Don't leave it behind. I mean, at least you'll be able to annoy your roommate with your flute, but it's something that you're good at, you're passionate about, it gives you enjoyment. Don't lose that. When you go to college, right, you are likely to do half of the physical activity you do in high school, which is horrible. When you go to college, you will probably cut your sleep time. You will probably, cut your exercise. You can't do that. You've got to make sure that there's enough in your life every day that you look forward to that's fun. And if you hit a streak where a lot of things aren't fun and you're just not enjoying life, then you've got to face the fact that I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing. It's not what I'm going to. Now, admitted, I didn't really enjoy calculus all that much, but I had to do it, but it wasn't my total life. I had enough other things that kept me going. See this guy there on the left? This is the guy that I trusted my life with as a graduate student. I got to Florida State, and I did my undergrad at Boston College. The winters were horrible, and I found a graduate bulletin that had palm trees on the cover of the booklet, and I said, that's where I'm going to grad school, and that's why I went to Florida State. And when I interviewed with the dean there, he knew I was kind of weird, so he sent me over to talk to this guy. And it turns out it was the guy there on the left, Michael Greenberg. And I went in Michael's office to interview with him, and he had just finished this run. This picture was in the Tallahassee Democrat, and he had just come off the track in this race. And he's sitting there dripping wet in a T-shirt, and the air conditioning in the back of the building in June in Tallahassee was off, so it was 100 degrees, and he's sweating, and he was totally insane. He's the most fun guy I've ever been around. He's got a million ideas. He runs. He's still alive. He does all these wonderful things, and everything was, he made a game of everything. He made a challenge of everything. He just had the most positive attitude about life of anybody I've ever been around. So I knew right away I'd found the mentor for my graduate work. Of course, I didn't realize at the time we were talking until we stood up and shook hands. He wasn't wearing any pants because I walked in on him as he's changing his clothes after this run, but whatever. So life and approaching it and enjoying every day is really, really, really important. When you're stressed, I want to ask you a question.
Dr. Higgins, we've lost your audio. Dr. Higgins, can you hear me? Dr. Higgins, we've lost your audio.
Fixing it means you figure out what it is that is causing me all this anxiety and that I'm worried about. But if you're stressed, it's an evolved response showing you something's wrong. And you can't ignore it. You can't go on about it. You just have to figure out some way of dealing with it. You should be doing this. There. So, Tim, are you there?
I am here.
Okay. A couple other thoughts that I just wanted to point out to you about things that I see people coming out of high school with. Most of my students are very respectful, have good manners, know how to greet people. They turn their cell phone off in class and they do all these things. Just pay attention to that. Don't put too much of your life on the internet. That will come back to bite you in ways you cannot imagine when you get to college. So start in high school and understand and be selective with your life and your personal details. Remember what we said before. You need to do well, you need to do good, but you don't have to be perfect. And finally, when you do leave high school and go to college, call your mom frequently. Okay, so here's your homework. 1, you're going to find a winner. You're going to identify somebody you admire, a couple of people in a couple categories, and you're going to write down and specifically note what it is about them that in your mind makes them a winner. You're going to step out of your comfort zone. You're going to do something in the next 30 days that you find uncomfortable, and you're going to do that routinely. You're going to do those kinds of things over and over throughout the rest of your life so that you're constantly challenging yourself, building up your confidence, right? One of those things might be speaking in public, and so you're going to elevate that skill, and you're going to do that routinely. Again, it builds your confidence, helps you ground yourself in reality. Along with stepping out, you need to learn how to meet people. One of the very important keys to life. So 2, 3, and 4 relate to each other. You're going to adopt the ask mom rule. If you're going to do something and it's questionable, whoa, would I tell mom about it? And if not, then don't do it. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance. We'll see if we have any questions. And I think Tim can tell us that you're going to probably get the recording of this made available to you also, right, Tim?
That is correct. So we do not have any more questions, so we'll be able to wrap up here in the next 30 seconds. And within the next 24 hours, we'll be sending you an email with a recording of this particular webinar, and we will also have a survey attached to that email. We would love for you to fill that out so that we can provide you with great content like we did today. So with that, unless you have any closing remarks, Dr. Higgins, we will let people go about their day.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and I urge you to visit the university at some point, especially those of you in high school. Make sure you come and look the place over, and do good, do well. Thank you.
Thank you.